Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very happy to introduce my today's special guest, Mr. Charpentier, a novelist from the United States. So, Mr. Charpentier, hello, the floor is yours.
Thanks for having me, Dr. Katzian. It's been quite some time.
Mr. Charpentier, let's talk about the situation which now actually exists in or takes place in Georgia and in Ukraine. I think you have some points to elaborate on this. So how do you assess what is happening right now in Georgia where we see how people are protesting against their government?
Well, I think that it could be, and I think it's too early to really tell. But I mean, it eerily reminds me of Ukraine during the Orange Revolution. And but again, it's very early. But I mean, a lot of there are a lot of things that are very, very similar, right? And so I would, but again, I would, I think it's too early to tell. I think that international organizations and governments need to really investigate and really find out, how much Putin's government is behind the divisions between the ruling party and the opposition. Again, it's kind of does look like a pattern of Putin's to really cause internal strife between a government that is essentially pro-Russian, because let's face it, the ruling party in Georgia is pro-Russian, and the people are. Another thing is that the people are the people of Georgia are protesting in the same way that the Ukrainians were during the Orange Revolution. But I think that it's too early to tell again if it's, first of all, if it's how much of it is orchestrated by Russia. I highly doubt that Russia doesn't have any sort of influence on what's going on. I highly doubt it, but that's I think at this point it's still really speculation. I don't. I think that the Russian military is probably too busy right now to really to invade Georgia in the way that they invaded Ukraine, and but of course, if the ruling party was ousted, or if whatever, if something were to change in the Georgian government, then anything's possible on Russia's part, because I think that the last thing that Putin wants is a pro-Western government.
Okay, Mr. Charpentier, it is really interesting to hear your point of view. I really wonder how you assess a current Georgian government as a pro-Russian government, because we hear this premise from different, let's say, different Western media outlets. So basically, they assess current Georgian government as a pro-Russian government, but maybe this government is a pro-Georgian government because it tries to, even though we can criticize the way let's say, Georgian government acts on different occasions. Personally, I criticize Georgian government in terms of its role and its behavior towards Russian invasion, Russian aggression against Ukraine. I think that it is really ridiculous how Georgian government acts regarding Russian invasion, Russian aggression against Ukraine. But if we put aside this topic and we really consider what is happening in Georgia, I really wonder how do you and other people actually assess Georgian government as a pro-Russian government? What allows you to think that the current government in Georgia is a pro-Russian?
Well, I mean, I shouldn't have said pro-Russian, but I could say a pro-Russian leaning government, leaning toward pro-Russian stance at times. I think that it's too early to tell to really know what's going on. But I think that there could be fear in Georgia. I mean, things change too. I mean, the Georgian government was really pro-Ukrainian at one point, but I mean, Putin could be putting pressure on the government, right? And I mean, the Georgian population is what, 3 million something plus, 3 million plus people. So I mean, it's a very small country, and it could easily be intimidated compared to a lot of other countries. Then again, Russia is a large country.
I agree with you. But let's go through some facts. So originally, these protests, they occurred because the Georgian government, they decided to push the bill on foreign agents. So basically, they tried to, and actually now they already voted in through readings this bill on foreign agents bill. So now all NGOs, non-governmental organizations, which receive funding from abroad, they have to declare who and which organizations actually funds them and on which articles. So what is let's say, their main goal of funding, let's say. And also they have to register as, let's say, foreign agents, in the sense they act on external funding. But let's look from a Georgian point of view on the situation. So when you see that so many NGOs which influence public opinion, they receive grants, funding from let's say, external donors. And obviously, I think it affects the security of the state. And the state, if it's a sovereign state, has to tackle the situation. So has to force NGOs which receive external funding to declare which money they receive and for what goals they receive. Because again, so many donors which finance so many NGOs in Georgia, they potentially affect the public security in Georgia, because eventually it will affect Georgian elections. Because, there is a saying, he who pays the piper calls the tune. So obviously those external funds which finance Georgian NGOs, they influence the Georgian NGOs. So at the end of the day, they influence Georgian politics. So maybe Georgian government tries to, let's say, cut the strings, so make Georgia more sovereign, make Georgia more independent in the process of adopting decisions. And this is the one point. The second point, that current Georgian government was elected in competitive elections.
But more sovereign for who? For the people? I mean, why do you think the people of Georgia are protesting?
I think that people of Georgia are protesting because these NGOs, which actually receive external funding, they now try to present this bill, which actually going to affect them, as a bill which was promoted by Russian government, as a bill which was promoted by Putin. So basically, young people who are protesting in Georgia, they're protesting not against this bill, they're protesting against their government leaning to Russia, as they are told by these NGOs and the opposition leaders who try to manipulate these young Georgian people. So that's why they are protesting. Again, I'm sure that almost nobody has read this bill on foreign agents. Me and you neither. So I think that this is a kind of tricky manipulation, and at the end of the day, I think that this is a sovereign right of each state, independent state, to demand NGOs who are financed by external providers of an aid to know for what goals this aid is provided. Don't you think so?
I think yes, but I think at the same time, they need to be more clear, and I don't believe they were, as to why this bill, they came out with this bill now too. Why now? Why
Well,
not 2 years ago? Why not? So I mean,
mhm,
why not before the Russian invasion, right?
mhm.
So I think the timing is bad for one, and I think that the people, it's uh, again, it seems like a very, very similar pattern to what happened to Ukraine, pre-Russian invasion. So, and I think that there may be some things that the people know that are protesting that that we don't know.
So I have an argument against what you just stated. Were Georgians protesting against the renewal of flights between Georgia and Russia, uh, while other European states canceled all the flights with Russia until the Russian invasion into Ukraine? No, Georgians, they did not protest. Were Georgians protest against the rise of the number of tourists from Russia who come each year to Georgia? No. Were they protesting against Russians acquiring properties in Georgia? No. Why? Because Russians brought money to Georgia. So Georgians did not protest against this. They're starting to protest just right now when this bill Georgian government is trying to promote. So why I'm just stating you this, that I think that there are different sides of coin. Obviously, the current government, in some sense, the current Georgian government, in some sense, is trying to lean on Russia. But from other perspective, maybe the Georgian government tries to cut its close ties with the West, which Georgian government considers as something which infringe its sovereignty at this point. Yeah, so maybe Georgian government is trying to conduct more sovereign, more independent politics against Russia and against Western countries. So, do you have any argument against this?
Well, I mean, maybe that was the final straw for the people, and they decided to protest. There's always a red line for things, and maybe that was it. And maybe all of what you said was, the flights and Russians buying property in Georgia. Maybe all that just added up, and just finally it exploded in what you saw. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what the protests are thinking. I haven't talked to any. I've never been to Georgia.
Yeah.
But I just, I can only speak on what I've read of Georgia, and what I've seen in the media, and but as I've said, this is quite unprecedented, right? I mean, Georgia has a protest this large in what since communist days, maybe? Am I correct?
Since 2003, when
2000.
Saakashvili took the power.
Okay. But this is the second. This is only the second biggest protest, right? Since it's right. Am I right?
Well, we can recall 2008 when Saakashvili, acted the same way as the current government. He tried to broke the protest which was on the street. And actually, it is really funny that Western governments and Western media put a blind eye on violation of human rights under the Saakashvili, which we have seen, in the Georgian jails, etc., when there were huge violations of human rights. So Westerns were really blind, on these crimes which were conducted by the Saakashvili's government. Why so?
I mean, I don't. It could be a lot of things. Maybe. I mean, it was covered, but it wasn't covered in the way that it should have been covered. I mean, maybe you didn't see Americans protest. You didn't see protests in Georgia, so I think it just didn't gain the same awareness because there was no public outcry, and some things just spark in the media and some things don't. And but that's wrong. It should have been covered, and because any human rights violation needs to be addressed, and needs to be it needs to be not only prosecuted. I mean, not only covered by the media, but it needs to be prosecuted in the rule of law. And so
okay.
You can't.
Okay, I have a question. The current Georgian government is rest on the majority in Georgian parliament. Elections which were held in Georgia were accepted by Georgian opposition, and those EU parliamentaries or who came to supervise the elections in Georgia. So we now have the government in Georgia, which was elected by the people, which was elected by Georgian parliament, which was elected by the people. And people entrusted the majority votes for the Georgian Dream Party, so the ruling party, which formed the government. Is it a democratic way to oppose the bills which were considered in the parliament and which were voted by the party which received the majority votes during elections? I mean, can we even envisage such situation in Western countries when, for instance, any parliament adopt the law and and there is a public outcry, protesters are on the streets, and governments simply don't use the police to force people out of the streets, because again, if you leave, democracy is always about responsibility. So if you elected a government, if you entrusted them authorities, if you trusted the majority of votes in the parliament, so it means that you entrusted them the power to hand down laws. So it's not possible simply to go out to the streets and demand something from the government in case you democratically elected this government. You understand what I mean? Yeah. So I think that we forget about this.
But first of all, people have the right to protest. That's the first. Regardless if it's I know that you do believe in lawful protests, right? As long as they're nonviolent. I know that you believe in them. Do you not? So I think that's the first thing. And I think the second thing is that every government is always evolving, and there are always issues that will come up that didn't come up before. For instance, the bill. So I think that's number two, and I think number three is that they're not necessarily protesting against the government per se. They're protesting against the bill. And perhaps there might be some irrationality towards the protesting. Again, I don't know. I mean, the people are just. I think the people and within that part of the world, it just. There's a war going on in Ukraine, and I think people just aren't thinking the way that they normally would, right? Pre Ukrainian invasion. So I think that again, there are a lot of things that are at play right now, and I think
Mr. Charpentier, I think the station. I'm sorry.
I think it's too simple to just say that it's one thing and.
Mr. Charpentier, these NGOs which exist in Georgia and Georgian opposition parties, which called out people to the streets in Georgia. Why they did not call out people to the streets when Georgian government allowed Russian tourists to come to Georgia to buy properties, to open bank accounts, when Georgian government restored flights, etc. Why these NGOs and opposition leaders, they did not call out people to the streets? Why they called out people to the streets only when the Georgian government started to consider the bill which indirectly affects these non-governmental organizations and opposition parties? So why so? So maybe, this is a kind of double game. This is not fair. I mean, why NGOs and Georgian oppositions did not call out people to the streets when Russians brought their dirty money to Georgia while or after the Russian invasion to Ukraine started and Russia started to kill people in Ukraine. So in Georgia, they continued to accept Russians as tourists inside its country. Georgia continues to serve, to give them hospitality, open restaurants for them, hotels, etc., etc., etc. So they economically and financially benefited from Russians. So I find this not fair. So what do you think?
I agree with you, though, and I think it's not just Georgia, but I think a lot of countries right now are accepting a lot of Russian tourists, and they like, as you say, that dirty money. And I won't mention any names of any of the countries, but there are a lot of countries that I've visited that have allowed a lot of Russians to thrive in those countries because they're because of the Russian dirty money, right? They're bringing money into the country, right? Especially the oligarchs. It's not just the average tourists, and there are many average, a number of tourists in different countries, but also a lot of countries have opened their borders to rich Russians, and this is common knowledge. I mean, this is especially for people like me who I travel a lot, right? So I've literally seen it with my own eyes, and I agree with you though. So I don't. Again, I think it's wrong. I think that we need to sanction Russia in every single way, and tighten things up and make things very difficult for them. And uh, and even for the Russian people, even though I don't personally blame every Russian for what's going on, because there are some Russians that are actually fighting for Ukraine and on Ukraine, in Ukraine's behalf. But you have to make it difficult for Russians to travel and to invest because, and it's nothing personal to all Russians, but it's just not something that needs to be done at this point in time, and especially during the war, right? But
Mr. Charpentier, I'm very grateful for your for your for this discussion, for actually your contribution to this discussion. I really appreciate an opportunity to have an interview with you. I hope we can make our interviews, more often, more frequent. So at this point, I would like to say again thank you and remind the audience that today we hosted a famous US novelist, Mr. Aaron Charpentier, who is following Russian invasion against Ukraine and who is following, let's say, station in Ukraine, even from time even before the war. So thank you very much, and have a nice day. Hope to see you soon.
Well, it's been since March 9th that you've had me on last. So yeah, I hope that I'm on soon.
Thank you.